everybody. It's Mark Pattison. I'm back with another great episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. I've got a great guest on today. He's actually a former teammate of mine back in the day. But before we get there, I want to tell you once again about where you can find all these amazing podcasts. I've done over 185 of these things now with over 100,000 downloads, which is really amazing. I am so grateful for everybody who continues to tune in. You can find those at www.markpattisonnfl.com or iTunes, Spotify. There's a number of different places where you can go and check out these different pods. I would always appreciate a ratings and review. It helps to elevate the popularity of the show. Not that I care, but because it gives you more exposure on those different channels where my pods are seen. Also, I continue to fundraise for Amelia's Everest, the Lhotse Challenge. We did reach our goal of $27,940, which is actually the height of Lhotse, which I'll be climbing along with Mount Everest this spring 2021. But we continue to fundraise because we don't just want to hit that summit. We want to continue on from there. Very grateful that the NFL threw in some money as well as the Raiders, and we continue to get more and more momentum on that front. Finally, if anybody wants to follow my journey, you can do that also at the same website, www.markpattisonnfl. I'll have a blog. You can also see me going up and down the mountain with a Garmin app. And that should be pretty cool for anybody who wants to tune in on all the drama that takes place in Nepal. Okay, let's get on to my friend, my former teammate, and a good guy, Don Dow. Don, how you doing?
Doing great today. How are you doing, Mark? It's, here comes the new year.
You're right. This is kind of a last minute pod in terms of, I was thinking about things yesterday. We're recording this on the 31st of December, 2020. And we've had quite the year. Everybody knows the virus that has knocked so many companies over. And I think you're not alone. It rocked the company I'm affiliated with, Maven Sports Illustrated. And we're going to get into that. But, there's a bunch of things that we share in common. The first thing is we were both Huskies. You were a couple of years ahead of me, and that's where I got to know you. You were a big offensive lineman. In those days, we went to a couple of Rose Bowls together. We went to a couple of Aloha Bowls together. It was exciting times and really, really kind of paved the way. And I want to, before we get into your career and all the cool stuff you've done post your not only Husky college career, but also NFL career. But I've spoken a number of times of what Don James did for me in terms of providing a roadmap to success. And I've always looked at you as somebody I've looked up to from the standpoint of you've always been a man of integrity. You've always been a man with a great moral compass, and you've run a first-rate experiential events business, which we're going to get into. But I want to know what Coach James and that college experience did for you in terms of where you stand today.
I think one of the greatest things that, and Mark, it's great to be on. And I've watched, maybe not all 185, but I've watched a lot of your podcasts and really enjoy them. But, Coach James really set the table. It's very difficult for me to not be a few minutes early for something. Right, because of him, and that influence. Forward, not looking back. But I think one of the greatest things I learned from Coach James was he trusted his people. He delegated to everybody, all the coaches and everything else, right? In the end, he was the key decision maker there. But I always marveled, and I don't have this skill. I always marveled how we'd walk down the hall and you try not to look in his office because if you met his eye, he'd probably call you in. And if he did call you in, he'd say, hey, how's your sister in Hawaii doing? And how's your brother doing? And, how are your parents over on Bainbridge Island, et cetera, like he had just been reading your file. And so I think the biggest thing for me coming out of it was I admired the way that he dealt with relationships. And that's the only way my company survived over the last, 25 plus years is the relationships I've been able to garner. then that work ethic, because gosh, how many times do we get knocked down and you got to get up again? And believe me, in the events business that I've been in for 25 years, I've gone through 9/11 and left $1.8 million in the snow in Salt Lake and spent 11 years paying it off, right? It's that perseverance and that just dogged determination to move forward and succeed. So I guess as an old offensive lineman, I was better going forwards than I was backwards. And I believe that's been my story for the last, 25 years.
Yeah, I love that. From my standpoint, I always felt like Don James, who, for those who don't know, is a coach from the University of Washington, and he'd kind of come from actually back east to Miami playing quarterback, and he was an interesting guy because he was small, relatively speaking, in stature, but he kind of carried a big stick, and he didn't say a whole lot, but when he said something, it had a lot of power to it. He was a man that was very well read, meaning he read everything and quoted a lot of different people. And when we'd have those meetings that he'd come in and kind of the theme of the week, it was always super powerful. And one thing that I know that you've instilled, because I've seen it in this past year, watching you do various LinkedIn videos and about pivoting and doing this and that. We could be down by 14 points with a minute to go in the game, and there was no question that we were going to win that game.
Absolutely.
And then many times we did, right? And trying to come back. And you're right. I think those relationships that we had amongst as teammates had to go in the whole theme of trust, and trust to hold hands with each other, of knowing that we all got each other's back. It didn't matter if you were a starter. I was a few years behind you, so it took me a few more years before I got my momentum. But everybody kind of recognizing the pyramid and understanding that there was respect for all, not just those guys at the very top and the scholarship athletes like yourself. And then the other thing that you mentioned about the daily discipline, I think that's something that Don James, I repeat this or I quote this quite a bit about the pyramid of success that he taught us. He created his own version of that. And so there's 25 different individual and team blocks of how you get to the ultimate pinnacle of anything. And the competitive greatness, which is the top rung. And again, this is something I've seen you, and I want to get your comment on it, is it is the championship, but to get to that Rose Bowl, to get to that Super Bowl, to get to a place where you built this company, you have to love the process. And if you don't love the process, just like what you've been going through this last year, where you created an events business, which you are essentially in the business of organizing people, companies, corporations to come to these incredible events, sporting, concerts, you name it. And then all of a sudden, the world and the United States and our local governments are saying, you can't come together. And how do you pivot from that?
Right.
And so it's that even though we're down by 14 points, how do you keep that daily discipline going?
Right. Well, ironically, when you think about it, my earliest lessons in the event business was being a player and going to the Rose Bowl or going to an Aloha Bowl or going to the Sun Bowl as we did, which was my first game, because here's the buses, here's the hotels, here's all the organization. You're going to these parties, as a player, organized and otherwise. So for me, my earliest experience in this business I've been in was as a player and being hosted as opposed to being on the other side of it. I do want to go back, though, to Coach James and those 25 points, because a teammate of mine that I think would have been gone, maybe he was a GA when you were there, Pete Tormey, wrote a book about the Thursday speeches and got all of Coach James' yellow pads of Thursday speeches and did this. And I've sent probably at least 50, maybe 100 of those books out to clients and friends, over the last number of years, and had Pete sign them and all that. But for me, going through that book, man, I was right back in the room on every one of those for the speeches that I was there. And, I honestly think that, sometimes you just take stuff in without understanding it, because there's so much that I do on a daily basis that are skills that I know I learned from Coach James, but I didn't understand that I learned them. right? It was just that repetition and that focus, right? And that drive of direction. And so I would encourage anybody listening to this, look up the Thursday Speeches on Amazon by Pete Tormey. It's a great book, and it'll really give you an insight into really just what we went through over those years and those skills that we learned and that we live. I use them every day, and I don't even know it.
No, I absolutely love that. And you're right, those Thursday speeches really anchored the foundation. And if you sit around and you listen, it just seeps into your brain, and it creates the foundation of so many people and what they do.
He touched so many of us, so many people, and even as, even Carol James carries on today, right? With social media and the things she does and everything else. The dog mother is still carrying on that legacy today. Yeah,
I love that. The dog mother, she was a sweetheart. I think like the core message as I sit here, and you and I have played at the highest level of college football, and we won the Pac-10 back in those days. Now it's the Pac-12, and we went to the Rose Bowl. We won the Rose Bowl. We've done all these things. We both played in the NFL. We both got drafted. There's been some. And the thing that people need to understand is those things just don't happen magically, right? Hard things are hard, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're hard. Starting a business is hard. Sustaining business is hard. But when you get through to the other side, there's so much reward in terms of the daily discipline, the hard steps you took to get to that place where now you can really reap and go, that was worth it. But, you've heard this before and you live it right now. This journey that we've all been on, everybody, not just you and I, everybody through this epidemic has been hard. Social distancing, hard. Not being able to go and hug your brother, your sister, your wife, hard, right? But we will get through it. And hard times, they always pass. It repeats in history, and it will repeat itself again.
I'll leave you with I'll start, but leave you with a thought, right? Yeah. So if somebody doesn't make it all the way through, I wish I was 40 going through this instead of 60, right? Because I view coming out of COVID, especially for a sales guy, right? I view it as the single greatest opportunity to gain market share in any industry you're in, right? But especially mine. There's a number of competitors who have gone out of business, right? There are so many companies that have laid off their entire staffs of event staff, right? That those people that had the relationships are gone. And for somebody like me who's been in it for so long, who deals mostly kind of chief marketing officer level or above, the ability to go out there and gain market share and find new clients are going to be unbelievable. And I think that is going to be across the board, for industries everywhere.
Love that. Let's transition into what you do today. So, Don, you started a company a long time ago, back in 1996, and it's called Don Dow Events.com. So,
or just Dow Events.com.
Dow Events. Okay, sorry. Dow Events.com. Tell me, I know you kind of came out of a couple of the tournaments that were being run up in Seattle. And the Goodwill Games and things like that. But where did the light come on that you wanted to take on this entrepreneurial bug? You knew you had it in you to start this thing. You had developed a few connections. And then where did you start your first event?
So where it really started for me was when I came out of football. The guy in Seattle by the name of Bob Walsh was my agent. And I went to work for Bob shortly after I was released from the Seahawks, right at the end of training camp of the year I was drafted. And he said, "We'll bring you in. We'll give you training. You can do sales and everything else." And this was leading up to the '84 Final Four in the Kingdom, right? Which was Georgetown, Houston with Phi Slamma Jamma, Kentucky with the Twin Towers, that whole thing. That was my first ever event, right? And so I went into that, no training, sold a bunch of sponsorships that I wasn't supposed to sell because I didn't know I wasn't supposed to go up and see the CEO of Rainier Bank, who I knew from bartending my girlfriend's Christmas party on Bainbridge Island growing up, or this or that, right? And so that was really the start of my understanding what relationship sales was. And then, so we did the sales for that. And then I ended up being, whatever assistant executive director of the Seattle Host Committee is, right, in 1984. Didn't have a clue what I was doing. Bob threw me in very deep water, but I learned operations at that point. Now I went to the Niners the following year, blew a disc in my back right for the Super Bowl in practice, and I was on IR at the time. Came back, went to work for Bob, and never left. Unceremoniously, I had a lukewarm cup of coffee in the NFL, I guess would be to say it. And then we went on a run and brought the Goodwill Games to Seattle. I was tournament director of the 87 and 88 NCAA West Regionals. We brought, Goodwill Games NBA All-Star Game. And so we really had a run of events there. And within all of that, I would go out and raise the sponsorship money. And then when event time came, I'd be on the operations side, but I would take care of those sponsors that we brought in. And so really, as I transitioned away from Bob, and I had an interim period where I was, kind of out of sports marketing, doing some stuff, I went back in, and the first major thing I did was went under contract to a group in Atlanta at the 96 Olympics. And they had a big hospitality company, right? And so one day they said, hey, the Masters is coming up. We want you to see our operation down there. And so I drive down the road in 1996 to the Masters. I called a couple of people, put clients in there. And so that really was my start. And then my contract with them ended. I didn't have a non-compete. And I thought, wow, this is cool. I think I could do this. And so I literally started doing the Masters on my own in 97. And then people said, well, gosh, Don, that was good. Could we do the Super Bowl? I said, sure, I'll call Jim Steger. Could we do, et cetera, because I had those relationships from being part of the official world, if you will. And so it just snowballed from there. And all of a sudden I was the first ever official licensee of the NFL for Super Bowl. I had an official exclusive joint venture with Salt Lake Organizing Committee for hospitality at the 2002 games. And it just kind of went on from there very generically. And at this point, this year would have been my 25th year at the Masters consecutively. We own a building right across the street from the Augusta National where we do hospitality. I've got clients that have been with me for 20 plus years, and they keep coming back every year, and they move from company to company. But when they show up somewhere else, and if they're going to be in this space, I've been lucky enough that they come back to us.
I know that you also do the Super Bowl, the Ryder Cup, the Olympics, the U.S. Open, Kentucky Derby, the Calgary Stampede. There's a bunch of places. I want to go back to 1996 because I think that was the year that Tiger had his debut, or I don't know if it was his debut, but he won the Masters for the first time.
Actually, it was 1997.
1997. Okay, so your first year in business.
Yeah, and I like to say I've had a great run with Tiger. I mean, literally, I did up until the last couple, I did every Ryder Cup, both sides of the pond, right? And really the growth and that trajectory of golf was Tiger Woods. And I literally jumped on his back and went right with him. I mean, we were at U.S. Opens at Pebble and other spots, always the Ryder Cup, certainly always the Masters. And off of that, we saw just that growth in other areas from World Cups, Olympics. Yeah, we've had a good run and done it all.
I want to go back to kind of I think it's your crown jewel. So you do all these events because obviously the Masters is one weekend of every year. So you've got to fill, your calendar throughout the rest. Going back to, I think, what is your crown jewel, the Masters, why is that such a special event? Not necessarily because that's where you started. Is it because of the building and then the programs, the different levels that you have within that to create this just amazing experience for the people that go down and go through and can walk the course and they can see it and the drinks and the food and everything else that you serve?
It all starts with, in my world, it all starts with exclusivity and access, right? Which is really what we provide at events. And the Masters is truly the most difficult ticket to obtain in sports, bar none. And it's one of the most difficult courses to be able to get on and play. Everybody wants to play Augusta National, right? Very hard to do. But I think the best thing about the Masters is it's that Southern hospitality. It's tradition, right? And it's so unique. I've had customers over the years, with the crash in 2008 or whatever, they might have pushed Super Bowl aside, but they would never back down on the Masters because it's the single greatest return on investment from a hospitality event standpoint in the world, and always has been. And it's just that unique. And the other thing about it too is that it's in the same place every year. So for somebody like me, I've got people that have worked for me down there for 20 years, right? That take that week off from their normal job in Augusta and come back to work, whether they're drivers or operations people or wait staff or whatever. They've been with me the whole time, right? Because that town, everybody wants to be part of it.
I want to pinpoint it just one step further. So let's go back to Don James again. And this whole thing was about attention to detail. And it was the little things that created the big results. Okay. So now I want to springboard, fast forward, and I want to challenge you just a little bit, because I know there's other events companies down there that are providing some similar service on paper, at least. But I know that you've had a lot of success there. And so I want to know what that differential, like for us, back at the Huskies, it might have been we paid more attention to special teams, and we always seemed to win games by 3 points or 2 points or 1 point because of the attention of detail of what we did in special teams, and then all the other things, less penalties and more takeaways and those things. And for you, what is that gem that you provide in your mind that separates you from the rest of the pack?
I think where we're different, especially in the internet age, right? Once the internet happened, all of a sudden there was transparency. You could go find a ticket on StubHub. You could do this, right? You could kind of put it together on your own. But in my world, in the Dow Events world, no matter what event we're at, and we really set the tone for this at the Masters, is you land, and my team has you from the time you land until we put you back on the plane. So it's transportation, it's accommodations, it's tickets, it's hospitality, right? It's dinner reservations out. It is a complete full service turnkey program. And so that really kind of set the stage for us in where the company's gone over 25 years. And going back to the question, my biggest challenge every year at the Masters is complacency, right? The team knows not to say to me, well, gosh, Don, we've always done it that way. Wrong answer, right? How do we do it better, right? And so every year on Saturday night, I cook dinner myself for the entire team. We pull everybody together at the championship club, have dinner, and I challenge everybody, right? How can we do it better, right? And we will have done this, for months ahead of time, right? And because I go down to Augusta all the time and see the team, or with my staff and everything, we're always talking about right after the event, boil it down, break down the film, right? And how do we do it better? And but it's that attention to detail, and the little things really do matter. I mean, literally one of the things we did, I've been in Japan, and I always remember it on hot, steamy days in Japan where they had the taxi cabs had these, cold, wet towels in the taxi so you could wipe yourself off. Mm-hmm. Well, if you step up on the porch at our building at the Masters, and it's one of those blazing hot spring days and the humidity's up, there's cold, wet towels in an ice box that our doorman is handing you as you walk into the club, right?
Yeah.
So it's just taking those little things and recognizing the little things and applying them. And I like to say there's no great new ideas, just new clients, right?
Yeah, it's called point of difference.
Right.
And that makes the difference. So I want to spin and go back the last 12 months. So while you were planning for the annual Masters tournament, which is always held mid-April, I was planning to go to Mount Everest March 31st, land in Kathmandu, and then start on my trek to climb Mount Everest around the 2nd or 3rd of April. I drove out to California mid-March to see my daughters, and I never left. Well, I did leave in June when I drove back to Sun Valley, but the point being, is that the world fell apart and this thing called COVID-19 hit. And it just literally froze everybody. And, the worldwide shutdowns, businesses, and people trying to figure out how they were going to survive this. And I think one of the things that's been inspiring to me is, again, seeing how you keep coming back every single week with this renewed optimism about next year and how you're going to pivot. And I want to talk to you about what have you had to do internally to understand what's going on, how it's affected your business, which it has, and how I see this hashtag behind you called hashtag on to 2021. So I think we're all saying that. We're talking again on the 31st of December. We are hours away from the clock turning, and then Yahoo, we're on, we have a vaccine on the way, all good stuff. How have you been able to survive? How have you been able to pivot?
Well, a few things, and it hasn't been easy. And like you, I literally went to Augusta about the 4th or 5th of March, was getting ready for my 25th consecutive Masters. We had a lot of stuff in the works, clients coming in as always, et cetera, et cetera. And the world stopped, right? And so literally anybody in my business has a safe deposit box or a safe somewhere full of badges, 2019 badges that are now worthless.
Yeah.
Right. And, you've put deposits out for houses and transportation and catering and everything else. You've got client money that's come into you. Right. And, and thank goodness, as I mentioned earlier, I'm definitely a relationship client guy, because I could sit and talk with our clients and roll them hopefully to 2021. I'm sure we'll talk about that, but I'm not sure that the Masters is going to happen with spectators in April. I don't see it happening, and so now all of a sudden we're rolling to 2020. We're rolling clients to 2022, right? And in the meantime, we've got to survive. Dow Events, I've got to survive. Team's got to survive. I've got to try to keep people with me, right? So PPP certainly helped with that, right? But, for me, luckily enough, I had that background we talked about earlier with sponsorship and whatnot. Close friend of mine and a 24-year client is CEO of Subway. And so, you're watching NFL games, you've probably seen Subway commercials, et cetera, on that. I was part of the team as part of an agency that I introduced Subway to, that assisted them in negotiating their NFL sponsorship, right? So there's a pivot, right, on a consulting basis, and and it's been tough, right? Because I wake up every day wanting to talk to clients, help them plan, right? I've got that that hashtag of on to 2021. The other one is events is ready when you are, right? But the difficult thing for corporations right now, and probably 4 of my biggest clients have done this, is that they have travel moratoriums on behalf of the company or any incentive travel until July 1st of 2020. So even if the Masters were for me to come back in April, none of these companies are going to go, right? And so when I'm starting to see, I was talking with one of the co-founders of a private jet company the other day, who's been a longtime customer and friends. And what they're telling me is that this is like the golden age for private air travel, right? The individuals, the entrepreneurs with means, they're getting on a plane and going places, right? And this whole thing is so geographic. I'm sitting here in Seattle, where our governor has just extended the moratorium for another week. Not sure what that means. But so you're not supposed to have anybody from outside your house come in, right? You can only sit outside in the freezing cold and have a meal, right? And yet, if I fly to Augusta tomorrow, I can walk into a restaurant. And everybody's doing best practices with masks and everything else, right? But I can have dinner inside. I can sit at a bar and have a glass of wine or whatever if I want to. So so it's also kind of perspective, right? Because in one sense up here, if you're sitting up here in Seattle, people are saying, well, no, you can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. But if you're in Florida, and I talked to a friend the other night who's sitting down in Miami, it's wide open, right? So that becomes the other perspective is if you're a company headquartered in Florida, you're saying, what do you mean you can't go out and do that? We've got 25,000 people in our stadium, or you're an SEC team and you've got 20,000 people in your football stadium, but yet in the Pac-12, there's no fans, there's nothing going on. So it's very confusing for customers, right? Well, you mean it's not going to happen? What do you mean it's not going to happen? So I know I'm kind of bouncing all over the place, but what I would say is this, and this is kind of how I'm looking at it. To the extent that people participate in 2021, I think it'll largely be high net worth individuals that come to things like the Masters or CMA Fest or Wimbledon or some of those other things that are on our calendar. I don't see it as being corporate, because I think they're going to be much more cautious. I also think that the second half of 2021 is going to be like Mardi Gras every day, right? For those high net worth. So people just want to get out and go experience stuff. And I think that 2022, with my earlier comment, like the greatest opportunity for market share ever, I think 2022 is going to be absolutely nuts. And I'm in that kind of goal setting, like we learned from Coach James mode right now of, okay, how do I marshal the resources, right? Gain scale so that Dow Events can absolutely go there in 2022 with corporations, because it's going to be unrivaled. Like I said, greatest opportunity in our lifetime.
Yeah. So, I appreciate you saying all that stuff. And what you kind of presented is kind of a macro look at where things are going, down the road. And really what you're saying is, as you start to goal set, and I really recommend this to anybody that's listening to the pod today, is really try to take those baby step goals. When I look at a mountain, I'm always intimidated, like, oh my God, it's Mount Everest. And I have all these butterflies. And then that's day one. And then day two, when I start step by step going up the mountain, I'm really only looking, for the most part, right in front of my feet, maybe 3 feet in front of that. And it's just the focus. And then you get to a higher level. And what you're really saying is, hey, for anybody that's out there that's struggling, 6 months, and I think we're going to turn the corner. The vaccine that's being rolled out right now, there's all these different phases. I think I'm in the last phase, probably rightfully so. But the net is that globally, we should be turning a serious corner unless some crazy variant, pops its head out, towards nailing this thing by May or June. And that's, I think, what you're really saying. So rather than look at this thing globally and like, what am I going to do? It's figure out a way to survive, work at the chairlifts, go bartend, whatever you need to do to sustain and get yourself to second base. You're on first base right now. Then that's all you get. You don't need to think about home plate. That's the big picture, but you'll get there. And like you said, tons of opportunity are going to come around the corner if you just hang in there and you don't panic. You stay calm, you do the small things, the point of difference that we talked about earlier, stay disciplined, and I think we can all get there.
Heck, if I was a chef, I'd be licking my chops if I'd been working for somebody else and I was able to make it through. Can you imagine the opportunity to walk into a turnkey restaurant in 6 months and a landlord would be begging somebody to come in and take that space?
Yeah.
We're going to see, and there's going to be so many different opportunities and situations like that, right? Where the entrepreneurial boom that is getting ready to happen, if people can marshal capital, right, and step into something, is going to be amazing.
I think that another opportunity too, this is the world I live in, which is, I'm in digital media, right? And with that, so many, and I know you're in a sense, you actually have events, but when you're talking to clients and stuff, a lot of times it's done over Zoom. But because of the pandemic, it's actually created this opportunity of corporate structures like the one I'm in, Sports Illustrated, The Street, other companies like that, where you have central headquarters now in New York. And they're understanding that you can actually be more efficient by people just staying home and communicating this way. So there's going to be all these opportunities from pharmaceutical sales to inside sales with different companies, and being able to pick up and go where you want. You don't have to be tied to a particular city. I'm in Sun Valley, Idaho right now, so I can be here yet communicating with everybody across the U.S. via Zoom. And it's been just a blessing in terms of that positive coming out of a negative, because at the end of the day, this life work balance should be in line with everybody, not just so out of balance like we all get, because it takes an hour and a half to commute up to 405 in LA to get to work, to go all the way back, right, and go through all that mess when you could be working out during that commute time. So I think there is, like you said, really good stuff ahead. # on to 2021.
Yeah, well, and the other thing too is that I'm with you. I think the work from anywhere is going to stay. And I've always said in my business, I could be on a boat as long as I've got an uplink, and I can run Dow Events worldwide, right? But the flip side of that is still, I was on the phone with long time 20+ year client the other night. He called and we kind of did a year-end chat, and he said to me, he says, "What's going on with the Masters? Are we going?" I said, "I really don't think so." I said, "They'll make an announcement in late January," but I said, I'm thinking they're going to do it like they did in November, maybe expand guests from members and maybe some of their sponsors, but that's going to be it. And he said, "Well, gosh, I have got to get face-to-face with our customers. This whole thing with Zoom and everything, it's great, but there's nothing like spending time looking people in the eye." And so literally, I now have instructions to set up a series of events in late April, May, June, and it could be, and this is going to be interesting too, because, Pebble Beach, where I've done probably 40, 50 incentive trips or experiential programs there, it's in California, right? The way California's locked down, can I really, in good conscience for that customer right now, say, I want to take you to Pebble Beach when he said it 4 or 5 times? I don't think so, because you can't plan against it and trust what's going to happen. So I'm going to find myself in Florida, right, in South Carolina at Kiowa Island or something like that, right, to do that. But the whole point being is that I kind of thought Zoom and everything was cool as it started out. And so I was even doing personal messages and sending a link to customers. "Hey, hope you're doing well, right? We're still here. Whenever you're ready, we're ready, et cetera, et cetera." Man, I just want to get in the room with people.
Yeah.
I want to get back to looking somebody in the eye and sitting back with a glass of wine or whatever it is we do around the fire pit and spend time with customers again. And I think that there's a real pent-up demand for that.
There's a huge pin-up. I mean, there's no question. There's no replacement for human connection, right? And you can only get so much. You and I are staring at each other right now over the computer. You're in Seattle, I'm in Sun Valley. We're 685 miles apart,
right?
And that's great. And we're able to do it this way. But there's nothing better than you and I sitting in a Starbucks in Seattle or in a bar drinking a glass of wine, toasting and talking about old times. But that is what it is. What we're really talking about is people trying to figure out a way to pivot. And that can lead into something else, and really just trying to get those next 6 to 12 months, get through that. And then it's blue skies ahead. And that's the key. Don, where can people find you? You've got a great website and it's full of exciting things. Someday I do want to go to the Calgary Stampede. I may even participate in it. I'll be your lead jockey coming down the mountain. But tell everybody where they can find you.
So DowEvents.com, just Dow, my last name, Dow, and events.com is our website. My email is Dow at DowEvents.com. So, or Don at DowEvents.com. So, we're out there. I don't tend to be a retail guy. I tend to be, corporate. And so a lot of it's word of mouth or referral is really how I've grown my company over 25 years. And I think that probably the biggest thing that I can say that's helped our success, and I think this goes back to Coach James and everything else, is, you do what you say you're going to do, right? You always deliver. That has cost me over the years, right? When somebody doesn't deliver me 20 Super Bowl tickets when the Seahawks were playing down in Arizona. I had to go out and find them, and my clients never knew, right? And that's just the world we live in. But and again, it's that do what you say you're going to do, total Coach James thing, right? And then I've always told my team, if somebody spends $1 with us, they're going to get $1.10, right? It's always a bit more, right? It's take that first step, that last step, just a little bit farther. And I think that goes right back to what we started with, and what we started with on Montlake at the University of Washington, Don James' locker room, right?
Well, the other thing he says is it takes a little more to make a champion. I say that all the time to myself. I say that all the time to my kids. And it's true. And I think we're talking about just that today. It takes a little more to make a champion. Pivot, think outside the box, get to the next 6 months, one step at a time, all those cliches, but they in fact do work. So listen, Don, totally appreciate you coming on the show today. You're an inspiration. You're a star. Keep doing what you do. You're going to get there. You are there. And really appreciate you.
You bet. On to 2021. Let's go.
All right. There he is. The one, the only Don Dow. Thank you. Hey, and thank you so much for listening to the Find Your Summit podcast. We are so glad to have you along for this journey. And if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend, share it on iTunes, spread it to the planet. We're looking to broadcast this to every person that is out there because, as you know, everybody has their own summit that they're going after. Okay, if you're looking to follow my journey, you can find that through my social links on markpattisonnfl.com. That's Mark, M-A-R-K, Pattison, P-A-T-T-I-S-O-N, NFL.com. So, until the next podcast, just remember, clear eyes, full hearts, and remember, it takes a little more to make a champion, so make it happen. Thank you. Bye.